North American Contenders Group day one was 3 days ago now, and I've been intending to do, in fact, actually before it began, I intended to do some kind of preview for it, maybe not something written, more like a video going through predictions, something like that. I had a look, I was chatting to Dogman as well, who did a nice prediction just by kind of drawing where he thought all the teams would go. It's actually a really difficult one as well. You can see how the first day went out. I've got it on the screen up there for you as well, but coming into this, it was very tight across the board and very difficult actually to say what was going on. A lot of these teams had recent roster changes, but were improvements rather than people, I don't know, getting kicked or whatever. And yet, Selfless had Defran missing as well. There were a couple of new teams in there that had been performing really well in the qualifiers, FNRGFE and FaZe particularly. And then there was just one group that LG Evil looked like they were going to be uncontested. So this video is aiming just to kind of run through the results that happened in that in the first day, talk a bit about what I expected coming into them and how the expectations differed from reality, in which they did in quite a number of ways, and then also talk about predictions for next week. Although I say next week, it's actually, what is it? It's like in 2 days or something, the next series of games. So I'm aiming to make this one a little shorter than the European one as well, because I realized that went on for something like 30 minutes. Nobody's going to watch a video like that. So let's get cracking. Group A, this first group looked ridiculous to me. I mean, let's start out talking about the relative strength of the groups. You've got some crackers in almost every group apart from Group B. Group B was the standout weak group here. Had 3 teams, Toronto Esports and Vision Esports, and you guys get paid, that were, I think, I don't want to say lucky to get into Contenders, but they were definitely teams that you perhaps wouldn't have pegged to actually get in there in the first place. On the bottom end of it, performed well in the qualifiers, or sometimes got a lucky bracket that allowed them an easier entry in, and then somehow all managed to get clumped in the same group. If you look at the people who actually got lower seeding in the qualifiers and then got placed in, they had much better results overall than the guys who ended up finishing more highly, teams like Toronto Esports, for example. So Group B definitely looked like a standout group in terms of lack of parity across the board, with LG Evil actually being, in terms of teams competing in Contenders, a tier 1 team, and the others being tier, I guess, 3 at most, actually. So the other 3 groups, though, really stacked. Group A and Group D looked like the most competitive, but Group C actually as well is pretty insane. So let's start with Group A. So coming into this one, it was very difficult to predict. Selfless, normally a tier 1 team, have lost to Fran and brought in, and actually have made some really weird switches. I'm definitely going to do a video about that probably in the next couple of days, because they're a team that right from the beginning has been really interesting to me. The way that they had this kind of system that nobody else was playing, really focused around Defran and Sinatra on the double hit scan, making a lot of room. Emong on the Roadhog as well. It was a comp that not many people run in. In fact, they were the first to run it, and they're the first really to ever make it work properly in this meta. And they had a really unique style, was lovely to watch, and now they've completely switched what they're doing, and there really hasn't, I mean, there's been a meta shift in terms of what people are playing and the thought process and stuff like that, but there hasn't been a large patch to really change what they're playing. It's just been that they've kind of decided that this is a switch that they have to do. So not only have they lost the Fran, they've actually brought Midnight in as well to play Diva for the team, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, because as I say, I'm going to do a proper video analyzing and breaking down the differences that have happened to Selfless's game style. But needless to say, it was a big difference for them, and it certainly had a dip in form. When you remove Defran from the team, you're going to have a dip in form. So I wasn't sure what to expect from them, wasn't sure whether they would actually get a top 2 spot. Before, with the previous roster, would have said they were pretty much guaranteed to get a top 2 spot. Liquid really started coming to form when they were running the triple DPS. When they brought Shadow 2K in, they've now brought him over to North America as well, so I was really expecting good things from this team. The fact that they then brought Fury in as well to go on the off tank, bring in a Korean diva, they're hot shit. So I was definitely expecting big things from Liquid coming into this tournament. So I thought that perhaps it would be Liquid and Selfless sneaking through. Then again, FaZe Clan came through that first qualifier and absolutely blew everybody away with their new roster, where they've got Joe Meister, Spree, who else have they got? I can't even remember. What's their new roster? Let's have a look. Louis, of course. Yeah, they brought Louis in as well. So that was a really interesting roster. I was happy to see those guys succeed and take first place in the qualifiers. They got really good seeding. But bit of a honeymoon period, perhaps. I wasn't sure quite how long that was going to carry on. Very small sample size, for example. CLG are a team that play a little like Yikes, I think. They rely a lot on the Pharah Mercy. They have a good system with it. Their Pharah Mercy play is good. They know exactly how to run it. They brought Silk Thread in for this tournament as well, which I think was a massive boon in the end, but something that I was unaware of coming into the tournament. So I had actually pegged them at something like 3rd, possibly even 4th if they failed to perform, because a running theme that I'll probably talk about a lot throughout these groups is that a lot of these teams, when they're playing well, are sick teams. Like the skill, the depth in North America actually at the moment is really, really strong. North America has really developed over the past couple of months into a legitimate region. These guys are strong teams, and they're proving it as well. They're actually performing superbly. They have like tanks that they can still make work really well. They're pretty much the only region that's still able to really perform with tanks, even against some of the better teams. They don't really have a team other than Rogue and Envious, who are like imported teams, right? That although Envious, I mean, they've been around for so long that you can kind of make the case that they're North American. But yeah, apart from that, they don't really have a team that could compete really on that like tier 1 global level, you might say. But these teams are legit. There is legit depth in the North American scene. So there's Group A. Now, how Group A boiled down in the end was a lot of parity across the board. Selfless have lost a lot of strengths from their previous roster, particularly with the Fran leaving and playing this completely different style. But I do believe that there's actually real potential in the roster that they're running. Again, gonna go into that at a later time. But the first game that came up was FaZe against Liquid. This would have been amazing if we got to see it on stream, I'm sure. But the new FaZe clan roster, as I said, I went through it before. They kind of trimmed the fat, or I guess trimmed Mikey A, who was playing with European ping the entire time. So we never really got to see how that guy was going to perform on like a proper stage. And remember that was always the thing with FaZe Clan, was that they turned up at the big LAN events when they had Shadowburn and whoever it was, normally Too Easy. In fact, I think it was Too Easy both times at the LAN events. Yeah, it was. That managed to turn up really big at the LANs. They kind of got things going. The pressure, I think, made them really focus on the game. Fact Fiction of Raucous have always been superb. And they got rid of Forsaken as well, which was interesting. People really highly rate Joe Meister. To be honest, I haven't seen enough of him, actually, because I didn't really focus on complexity. Back when they dropped from even the tier 2 teams a while back, they were like competing in the Carbon series, and they're just shuffling players in and out all the time. I literally just gave up on that team and didn't even watch VODs of them anymore. But, you know, maybe I missed a trick there as well, because Joe Meister and Shake are really highly rated by their peers, and a lot of people who have followed complexity, who have followed the North American scene at that kind of lower level. But yeah, so I've kind of slept on these guys in a sense, so I'm not really too familiar with Joe Meister and his talent, but highly rated. So this team, FaZe, though, over the course of this group, you'll see that they really didn't perform at the same level as you might have expected them to if you were looking purely based on the only tournament that they played, which was the qualifiers for this, where they finished in 1st seed. They didn't really live up to the 1st seed. I mean, if you look back at the bracket, they're actually in 4th place. But it was 2 ties, and they tied against other teams. I mean, they tied against the top seed here, Liquid, and then they tied against, was it CLG as well, I think? So there's a lot of parity in Group A, that's what I'm saying. So they could, I mean, it's difficult for them to bounce back at this stage because they actually have 0 wins, and Contenders does it based on wins and losses. But it's not a performance that they can be too upset about. Liquid as well look to be, I mean, we didn't actually see them the whole time, because the game that was actually streamed at the end was Selfless against FaZe, so we didn't see CLG or Liquid. So we didn't see CLG with Silk Thread, and we didn't see Liquid with Fury. But my feeling from these results on paper is that Fury's probably added something that ID never could, in that he was really the flex player for the team that's been able to add in this like real good diva ability that he's brought over from Korea. So massively important in this meta, was something that Liquid were never really able to do before. They were excelling when they went over to the triple DPS, but you can't just run triple DPS all the time, especially with ID normally running the Pharah. It's a bit more niche. This diva comp that most people are running now, that originated kind of in Korea and was really perfected over there, has been proven just to have ridiculous versatility. Going into the next game, CLG here, I mean, the actual score is 3-2 in terms of what Contenders ranks it as, but OverGG counts, they got a draw on Hanamura, so it just counts it as like being 0 points for either team, whereas Contenders actually does it as 1 point for either team. But yeah, CLG coming out with a 3-2 win here, with Selfless also taking Route 66 towards the end. Selfless guys with Carpe on the roster. Carpe has actually got a really good Genji and a pretty decent Soldier 76, so the team's got different strengths in different areas now and can play kind of, they're more well-rounded rather than having just a single star that they rely on. And massive performances out of their DPS players. But again, Silk Thread, man, this guy is a beast. I think he's just finished something like a graduate program, or he's just finished his degree, or I'm not quite sure, but I read somewhere that he's just finished some kind of studying and might now be able to commit to playing Overwatch full-time. This guy is a beast. Really reminds me of Sinatra in terms of his individual ability and his hero pool and the impact he has. But Silk Thread has consistently kind of boosted teams that he's played on repeatedly. Every time you see Silk Thread sub in for a team, it's a good shout to expect more from them. And CLG really performed. They did well here. This game, again, off stream, they managed to take a victory over Selfless. Not going to go in-depth on every map and just go over the paper things, because, again, I want to keep this slightly shorter than the European one, because that one was too long. CLG, again, performing really well against FaZe Clan, but FaZe Clan managed to get the draw against them here. So, you know, again, when we think about next week, and I mean, I say next week again, these games are coming up fairly shortly. When we think about the games that are coming up for, like, the rematch here, it's all going to be, in my opinion, based on not so much what they've taken away from it or how the two teams have developed, but whether they can actually keep up form. The North American teams tend to be really quite up and down in terms of what they bring to the match on any given day. I don't really know why that is. I don't really have like a pet theory as to why the North American teams in particular seem to be more inconsistent than other regions, but it does seem to be a trend. They have a lot of teams that can contest each other on any given day. They bring a different thing to the table. Maybe teams that have been around a bit longer tend to have that more nailed down. But a lot of these rosters are kind of new as well that are playing in Contenders. A lot of teams made switches coming into the tournament. So CLG v FaZe here ended up in a draw. Again, lots of parity in this Group A. And Liquid, again, sorry, this wasn't the game that was streamed. It was FaZe against Selfless that was streamed. But Liquid managed to come out with the win here as well, with Selfless taking Numbani. Selfless, again, better on the escort maps, it would seem. Liquid a bit more well-rounded across the board when you look at their individual map performances. Then Liquid just kind of slam CLG and give them the win that managed to boost them into the first place, essentially, which was a little bit surprising when you actually look at how the games went down. OverGG hasn't got the exact recordings for these, so you can't really tell how close it was as well. It's just got kind of the overall checkpoints, so these kind of results, when they're being recorded on over.gg, are relayed back from the players, because obviously there's no stream, you can't get replays or anything like that. Overwatch is a little bit behind other titles in that sense at the moment, but it's nice that we have this information, I guess. But yeah, Liquid in this situation appear to have given them a bit of a drubbing, but you can't really take that much away from it. Again, it seems like a lot of these teams very close on paper. Now, this is the game that was actually streamed, FaZe against Selfless. FaZe in this game did actually look like they were weaker than their qualifier performance. They looked like they had really stepped up in the qualifiers and weren't quite able to replicate that once they had actually got into the groups. If we take this game as being indicative of their overall performance, Selfless actually looked really good as well. Selfless looked like they had a good style. Midnight was playing a good diva for them. They'd been brought into the team, it appears, to play that diva. Kresnik sat on the bench. They really only seems like they want to field him on Reinhardt. Not comfortable with his Winston or his diva play. He used to play diva for them, so there's this really weird situation where Emong used to play the Roadhog for them, used to play the off tank, pretty much only played the Roadhog as well, and used to flex over to a couple of DPS heroes as well. Used to see him on the Soldier 76 every once in a while when they would run a Genji from one of their main DPS duo. And now he's playing main tank for them on Winston. Super strange. So, but they've got some kind of system set up here. And it seems to be working out fairly well for them with Sinatra and Carpe. And Midnight was performing pretty well. Michael was actually doing a lot better than previous performances that I've seen from him on the Zen. Seems to be kind of finding his feet on that role, where he was always a very heal-focused Ana rather than DPS-focused Ana. And actually seems to be getting a bit more comfortable with a fragging role. A role where he's doing damage and thinking about his positioning a bit more aggressively, perhaps. But yeah, this was, to me, a story of Selfless looking better than they did on paper, if you look at how they're actually just sat here with 1 win and 2 losses. It is kind of crucial as well that you get the losses in these situations. That makes a big difference the way that Contenders actually ends up working with how they rank the teams. Because you can see here that these guys have actually got a better win record than map record, than CLG, who are 4 for 7, but are above them because they actually have one tie rather than one loss. And that makes a big difference when you're talking about the scoring of these teams in the group stages. So Selfless perhaps have been a little unlucky with the way that they've performed, you know, saving it up for a couple of big maps, only able to take a single map in every series whilst still making it close. That would be kind of my understanding of it. Again, a lot of parity in this Group A. A lot of good teams, a lot of potential. And FaZe, it seems on the first day, you know, they're in 4th place. They didn't get a single win. They've got 2 ties out of it, though, against Liquid and CLG. And they looked like they were struggling a little bit to find the same kind of synergy that they had done in the qualifiers. They definitely didn't look like they were as good a team. Okay, so if we take a look now over at Group B. Group B, I'm not going to spend very long talking about whatsoever, because the only game that we actually saw from that was LG Evil against Toronto Esports, and LG Evil, certainly in the first 2 maps at the very least, just smacked them about. It was just bullying, to be honest. Toronto Esports didn't look like they were on their level whatsoever in the first 2 maps. They definitely picked it up towards the end, though. On Assault, they looked like they got their confidence back. They had a game plan. They went in, they executed it, actually won that map. And then they made Route 66 much closer than the previous 2. But at the beginning, honestly, it just looked like they were different caliber. And I made a joke about Avast rigging the groups, but genuinely LG Evil got really lucky here. Because if they'd been in another group, like if they'd been in Group D, it would have been very difficult for them, I think. There's some teams in here that can definitely deal with their style. Group A would have been very interesting, to say the least, depending on which team you sub in and out. Group C, they'd have probably been able to qualify reasonably easily. I mean, it's not going to be easy, no matter which group you're in, apart from Group B, but of the 3, probably easier for LG Evil to slot into Group C. But they just got a ticket in here. 3 wins, 0 losses, 0 ties. They just kind of smacked teams around. As you can see from their win record, 9-2-1. And this game, oh, of course, they actually drew on Temple of Anubis. They didn't even win. I thought Toronto Esports won that map, but yeah, they drew in the end. LG Evil managed to pull it back. And that one was super interesting, actually, the way that went down. Lots of Sombra being played. Attack Sombra coming out from LG Evil. I did a video about it as well. Go have a look. It's called Rewind. It's the most recent one. I kind of broke down what was happening there. But yeah, Numbani and Nepal were just demolished. LG Evil just held them at the first point and then slammed them. Nepal, they just trounced them as well. Route 66, much closer, you got to be said. LG Evil, they managed to push it and get the win in the end, but that was kind of closer, and you can see why Toronto Esports ended up in 2nd place here. But Envision, you guys get paid. They are the weaker teams, and Toronto Esports. Pretty much, if I was going to be honest, I'd say that these 3 teams are the weakest teams in the tournament. The other teams that you could put up there, I mean, FaZe Clan and FNRG actually performed really well in the qualifiers, but they're both sat fairly low in their groups. But they actually had good performances in the qualifiers, probably put them above these 3 teams. Tempo Storm as well, very up and down. They're actually sat at 0-3, which is worse than any of these 3 teams, but you got to say that they're playing against better opponents as well. But Tempo Storm have actually had peaks where they looked really good, whereas none of these teams have. So definitely Group B kind of stacked with bad teams from that perspective. So kind of went exactly how I was expecting, which is the only group that went like that. So Group C, coming into it, would have a lot of questions about this group, actually, even more so than Group A. Immortals had just made some recent roster changes, brought in 2 Korean players, Karev and Fate, 2 players that they never really played at the top. They used to play for Mighty AOD. It's a team that used to get a lot of really interesting, close, sometimes upset wins over big teams in online games. Used to be the bane of the Gongdu teams because they used to knock them out of Nexus Cups fairly frequently. Actually got a win over... Damn, who was it? No idea, actually. In the most recent Nexus Cup Korean qualifier, they beat a team that was supposed to be higher seed than them as well. And then they performed really well in their group at Apex. They got the win over Kongi Panthera. They actually made them look like they were very vulnerable to very aggressive dive comps. And Karev and Fate are 2 of their strongest players on Mighty AOD. So they drafted those guys in. But the question still remained, would they actually be able to integrate them into the roster? The first day of qualifiers they had barely played with them, and Immortals actually got knocked out in the round of 32 or 16, something like that. But then in the second day, they managed to win in the end. You know, once 8 teams, the top 8 teams, you would say, have been eliminated, the second day of qualifiers, Immortals were able to come in and actually won it, took 10th seed, sorry, because Cloud9 got the 9th seed. So 10th seed, and Immortals have actually just ramped it up from there. It's kind of what you would expect coming into it, that, you know, you get people into a team, you have a system develop, and you improve, but they actually look really strong. And in particular, just bringing this up to show you guys the roster that they're using, Fade's going to be playing tank for them, or has been playing tank for them. Kariv on the flex support, playing a lot of Zen. Kariv had some sick performances as well, where he just, like, single-handedly won fights for them because he's popping off. And Fate, very solid. But Grim Reality as well has really stepped up on the Tracer. And this has been a theme as well of a lot of these North American rosters, is that previously they've kind of lacked real star Tracer talent, apart from a select few. And a lot of these teams that were good in previous metas, but have kind of been struggling a little bit now, I think a lot of it was because they had players that were really good on, for example, Grim Reality, really good on heroes like McCree. A bit more of this flick style, not really the same skills that you transfer over to Tracer at all, even though they're hit scan. They played very, very differently, and the best Tracer is really about maximizing your movement and ability to stay aggressive even when you're in enemy territory. So Immortals have really stepped up in multiple ways, and Agilities was playing phenomenally as well. So they end up with 3 wins. I think coming into this group, I would have said that Immortals and FN or GFE were actually the 2 teams to escape it after both days of the group, so they've still got 1 day to play. That might end up being true. But Yikes as well are a team that I think are very up and down. They had a period where they looked like they were awesome. They won the Overwatch Monthly Melee as well, of course. Beat Selfless in that after Rogue had finally left North America and gone over to Korea. You felt like it was probably Selfless's time, but they just couldn't deal with Yikes' Pharah Mercy compositions and other things that they were throwing at them as well. But as for how Group C went down, FN or GFE, we didn't actually get to see at all on stream after their really decent qualification run. In the first day, they managed to qualify, made it to the semifinals, ended up getting beaten by FaZe 2-1, who ended up winning the entire thing. So you could probably say that they were like the 3rd best team in the qualifier the first day. And they have a really nice system actually as well. Buds is really been opened up. Like, he gets to really flourish in this team. When he was playing the Widowmaker, Bud's Widowmaker has always actually been stellar. Even when he was slumping and playing in Fnatic, and I thought that he was like a bit of an issue for them in terms of his playstyle, his Widowmaker was always fantastic at that point actually, and his Reaper probably is as well, but he never plays it. But the way that they've actually got this set up, where Enigma, a very intelligent player, is going to be playing the Diva in these kind of setups, as well as going on to, well, any of them can play the Tracer as well, but Buds, I think, tends to stick away from it because Enigma and Clockwork are better than him at it. Muma's a decent tank. Enigma and Clockwork, this is just a nice setup. I really like the trio of Clockwork, Enigma, and Buds. It has a lot of synergy, actually. And Buds' Genji has improved massively from the last time we saw it. He actually looked like he was a decent Genji player. He's not going to be popping off and wrecking people, but he's definitely adding that spice into the team where they can run that composition and be very comfortable with it. But having said all that, that was from my analysis from the qualifiers. We didn't get to see them in the group stages, and they're currently sat at 1 win and 2 losses, one of them being to Immortals. But Immortals were looking really good. Yikes come in, they slammed Tempo Storm. It looks like it was a bit of an off day for Tempo Storm. They had a period where they were looking really good. Again, one of those teams that you really don't know which Tempo Storm you're going to be seeing, I feel. Same with Yikes, but Yikes ended up actually bringing it in this qualifier, and Tempo Storm didn't. They're sat there with 0 and 3. But again, playing against difficult teams, and some of these maps look like they were fairly close when you go into later games. These actually don't look like they were close. But when you go into some of the later games, they do look like they were putting up a fight in some of these games, and again, we didn't see them on stream, so you can't really know how they were performing. Maybe they'll bring it for the next round of the round robin. Immortals 4-0 Yikes, and this one was on stream, and this one was actually a really good game, and Yikes looked like they hadn't brought the same fire that got them really at the top of their game when they were winning the Overwatch Monthly Melee at that kind of time. They looked like they were a little less coordinated, but at the same time, they actually played Immortals really close, and I feel like Immortals are going to be one of the really strong teams, especially as they develop and get better and better throughout this tournament. So I was reasonably happy with Yike's performance here, and I think they were as well. I saw some of their tweets afterwards. They seemed like they felt good about their performances, despite the fact that they lost this game, and I think they tied another one, right? No, they didn't actually. They only lost this game, so yeah. Got to be feeling good about that one. But this one, they went into Hollywood and kind of got stalled out and beaten. It wasn't that close, actually, between the two of them. Immortals looked like they had the better end of it by quite a way. You went into Oasis. This game was nuts. That first round absolutely should have been Yikes. It was on Gardens, the classic Pharah Mercy map, the best Pharah Mercy map in the game at the moment, I think. A lot of teams running it. Immortals started... Yeah, we're running it the whole time as well. And Yikes actually had the better end of them for the most part of it, but they didn't play... They had one delayed fight where Immortals were able to get from like 30% up to 80 for a full 50 seconds, were just sat on the point. Yikes couldn't get a clean wipe on them, even though they were winning the fight the whole time. And Immortals had, I think, 3 really crucial engagements where they were coming in and flipping the point, and they played that perfectly, where actually Agilities, who's on the Pharah, didn't even focus on trying to get Za and Ginger Pop out of the situation, just left that to, well, a couple of times they got a ridiculous D.Va self-destruct coming out from both sides, actually. It was actually mostly from space. He had some nutty ones. But in terms of, they just kind of pressured Za and Ginger Pop back, and then they came into it, and Agilities was just focusing the ground game and wrecking them on the floor. And then they would get rid of everybody on the floor, clean up the Pharah Mercy, and be able to flip the point. So Immortals had a much better flip 3 or 4 times. No, 3 times. 2 or 3 times. That allowed them to actually get back control of that. And then they just had a nutty overtime that lasted forever. It honestly lasted forever, the overtime situation. Immortals come out on the end, both teams at 99%, Immortals win it. They go into the next one, eventually able to scrape through. You can see how close it was here, though. Oasis, strong map for Yikes, but Immortals, again, still able to take it. Immortals, as well, look like they have a plan for Assault. They absolutely slammed them. It was really good. I think they're... As I said, they're coming together. They're both coming together as a team. They've really trimmed the fat from their roster, and they're getting in good Korean imports that have boosted them in terms of individual talent and the teamwork that they're able to do. They don't seem to be hindered that much by communication at all. They look like they're really on point. As I said, Grim Reality stepping up as well on that Tracer role. Looked like he was having some good performances, able to get the 4-0. Cement their place at the top of the group. This game happened off stream. FN or GFE, you know, they're putting up decent performances. Managed to get 3-1 over Tempo Storm. Again, Tempo Storm, just judging by the results on paper, looked like they didn't quite have the performance that they were hoping for in this tournament. Up and down, as I said. Then they come into the game against Yikes, and they managed to take a single map, which was the Temple of Anubis. I feel like a lot of North American teams actually are kind of struggling on Assault. It tends to be not too much a bit of a coin flip, but it's more like if you put a bit of practice into it, you're probably going to be able to win, because a lot of the teams really focus on just getting their teamwork down, and they don't think too much about the Assault maps, it seems, and that has been a trend for North American teams for quite a while. And then Immortals able to get the 4 over Tempo Storm. Again, Tempo Storm not really performing where they would want to be. So for Tempo Storm, this is going to be an almost impossible climb back into a playoff position for them. FN and GFE, if they are able to harness the kind of ability that saw them get deep in the qualifiers and keep up that strong performance, I think they also, though, rely on Yikes taking a dip. Yikes, a bit of an up and down team, very emotional, it seems. If they start getting tilted early on in the next day of round robins, I can see FN or GFE overtaking them, but I think it is going to be, if that situation happens, it's going to be because Yikes tilted and ended up going down, not because FN or GFE really stepped up. I think they do have a lot of talent on their roster, but they tend to hit... I mean, I don't know why I'm saying they tend to hit as if there's a lot of data here to use, but just judging from their playstyle and the talent that they have in their roster and stuff, they seem like more of a stable team that's really going to be able to put up good, consistent performances, FN or GFE, rather than a team that's going to have really high highs and is going to actually just be able to explode in certain situations like Yikes has shown before. And they're not quite on the level of Immortals, who at the moment look like a really good team. So, final group, Group D here. Was super interesting. Wow, what a group. To come into this one, it was almost impossible to call. To be honest, I would have put Renegades bottom and they finished top, which shows what I know perhaps. But Kungana have been looking really strong, and I think I would have put them second to Cloud9, or possibly even first with Cloud9 second, judging by their results and their style and their form coming into this tournament. Cloud9 showed at Takeover 2 that they are not a team to be messed with. Their newest additions have been excellent. They have a game plan, strategy. They know what they want to execute. It's been really good for them. Hollywood Hammers managed to trade maps with them at Takeover 2, but that was an overperformance from Hammers. They were playing tanks. It's what they're comfortable with. Cloud9 for some reason decided to play Reinhardt compositions into Hollywood Hammers. They had excellent performances with a strategy that hadn't been seen before on Anubis. Hammers just had a really good LAN, and I think it was slightly unreasonable to expect them to be able to form at that level in their first tournament over in North America when they're playing online, and they don't have that same situation, and Cloud9 are looking at the rematch and are going to have ways of adapting. So I expected, that was the game that happened on stream actually, Cloud9 Hammers. I expected it to go that same way with Hammers actually, with Cloud9, sorry, taking the win. But I was not expecting Renegades to blast out into the top with 2 wins, 0 losses, and a tie. So, again, a lot of parity in Group D as well. Cloud9 managed to split the board with Kungana. Again, Kungana have been playing really well. Dogman, excellent. Flex support, really intelligent guy. This team has fire, man. Fire. I was talking to some of the people on it. They're passionate would be an understatement, right? And they have just ramped up their performances. Michael and Baby Boy, I think, are really good. I've really rated them ever since we saw this first Kungana roster breakout. And Bishu seems to have added something that the previous Kungana roster never had with his off-tank performances. And you can see here the split in maps. Again, not the best recording of statistics here because they didn't have the best data coming out of it, so not really going to dwell on that, but they managed to split maps across the board. Both of those teams fairly even. Renegades are another team where you never know what you're going to get from them, but from what I heard, Renegades have not been seen on stream as well, so this is not my analysis, this is just what I've heard from players and stuff like that, is that Jesus has really stepped up in terms of his tracer play in a similar vein to Grim Reality, where previously you wouldn't have expected either of them really to be putting up big numbers or be able to perform that well against other tracers or be able to have that much of an impact. Jesus in particular, I think, remembering back to a couple of his games, was actually quite a shocking tracer, and apparently now he's really stepped it up and he's put in the work, put in the hours, and he's actually at a good level. And that seems to have really boosted their team. They've got these new players in as well. They finalized their roster, what was it, 2 months ago, something like that. And since then, they've been having decent results, but what the fuck? That's a resub, and I'm not streaming, so I don't know why that came through, but there you go. There's just a little Easter egg for anyone who made it this far, half an hour in. Man, I wanted to keep this one shorter, but there's so much to talk about. And yeah, so they finalized their roster. They're getting good results. This seems to be a breakout tournament for them. But Renegades in general, like the trend with Renegades is to peak early in a tournament and dip off towards the end, or just not be able to hold that form throughout it. So definite potential for them to drop off. When you look at where they're at the top, but they're not at the top in terms of LG Evil or Immortals, where they're uncontested, basically. A team like Kungana could, or possibly even Cloud9, could overtake them, or could at least knock them down to the second spot, potentially third, given how much parity there is between these top three. You really got to wait and see. Renegades could shit the bed. Of the 4 teams that are currently at the top here, I think Renegades are the most likely, if any of them do, to shit the bed in the second of these days of the round robin and end up potentially dropping out. But it would be so difficult for them to drop because they've done an excellent job in the first day, and I hope they're able to keep this form up. I hope this is like a new leaf for Renegades, where they're really able to keep up that consistent excellent performance, because so far, I mean, we haven't even seen them on stream, but these guys look sick. So I managed to take 3 maps here apart from Lijiang Tower, but again, that one incredibly close. Look, you do have the data there and you can see how ridiculously close that one was, and they managed to take the other 3 maps from Hollywood Hammers. And then they beat Cloud9 3-1 as well, with only the first map, Numbani, going over to C9. Numbani's really a map I think that does play into Cloud9's hands in terms of you can play different compositions on it. It has certain areas like the first point and the last home stretch that really you get a lot of value out of playing them tactically. So it's a map that plays into their wheelhouse, and they managed to take that single map, but Renegades get the 3-1. Again, great performance coming out from them. Kungana get the better end of Hollywood Hammers. Again, kind of expected. Hollywood Hammers not really having the performance that they would want, but again, getting odd maps here and there. Their map record is better than their actual win-loss record, but Kungana have just been playing really well, and Group D was so stacked, I think. Just a super stacked group. Like, that is crazy, that group. Especially with Renegades playing so well. And then, yeah, Kungana split maps with Renegades. So, again, 2 ties for Kungana here, where reasonably, I think they probably could have taken the win, but it's such a narrow difference. Like, the way that Contenders works is that the 2-2 means something totally different to if one of the maps goes the other way. Like, a win or a loss is massively different to a draw. And then this game we saw on stream, repeat of Takeover in terms of the matchup, but very different style. You can scroll down and see actually my comment there. Cloud9 not making the same mistake of running Ryan into Hammers, outplaying them there dive v dive, and they essentially were. Hollywood Hammers way more comfortable if they're running the Reinhardt compositions, I feel. And even though Fisher was putting up big performances, Nesh actually had the LAN of his life at Takeover 2, and I think it would be unreasonable to expect that performance from him every single time when they play online. Didn't really have that performance. Fisher was the guy that was really stepping up. Snizzlenose had some great Roadhog performances, actually, particularly over on Route 66, which was the map that they were actually able to take. But Cloud9 look like they're gelling, look like they have a decent system that's working well for them. The problem for Cloud9 actually is that a lot of other teams in North America have stepped up at about the same time. This is going to be amazing to see these teams fight again. As I say, I think that coming into this one, right, if we quickly recap over and I say who that I think is going to progress, some of these teams might not perform. Teams like Liquid and Renegades might not perform at the same level the next day, but they've kind of done so well on the first day that they might still, even if they had an underperformance, scrape through in the second place. From the look of it at the moment, it does seem like CLG and Liquid are going to be the teams to be able to go through. CLG is eminently overtakeable, though. Very, very possible that they get overtaken by Selfless. I think Selfless are actually performing at the level where they definitely could. So my prediction for who gets through is Liquid, then Selfless, actually, in this group. Liquid really stepping up with Fury on the roster. CLG playing with Silkdead, but I think they're going to be overtaken by Selfless. I can really see them gelling over the week that they've had in between the 2 games and getting that one. So that would be my prediction, Liquid then Selfless, despite the fact that they're currently in 3rd. My prediction here is just exactly the same, just LG Evil to shitstorm people, or possibly not even shitstorm people the next week. They might just take it easier because they're pretty much guaranteed their 1st place already. And Toronto Esports, I think, are probably going to be able to take the 2nd. It's been nice actually to see Toronto Esports step up and take maps over the rest. Highly doubt that they would have qualified for playoffs if they'd been in any other group, though. That's just super strange group. Group C, Immortals, I think, given what we've seen from them, they look to be on the rise. I don't think this is the peak from them yet. I think they're going to continue to perform really well. Look at that map record as well. Superb. And I expect nothing less from them. I think they're going to qualify in 1st place. Yikes, if they don't manage to qualify, as I said, I think it's because they'll have shit the bed in terms of their performance, and FNRG FE will just take like the opportunity and qualify in 2nd. But if I was to place a bet, I think Yikes are probably still going to be able to make it through. They have the advantage over them in terms of the win-loss record at the moment. They just have to perform kind of similarly to be able to make it through. Immortals, then Yikes, but I wouldn't be too surprised if Yikes shit the bed and it's FN or GFE that make it in 2nd, but I think that's less likely. Group D, Renegades have done so well that I expect them to qualify no matter what. I think Kungana is going to be the other one. Coming into this, I definitely would have said that it was Kungana and Cloud9 going to make it through, but Renegades have performed so well at the beginning that even if they shit the bed in the 2nd day, they're probably still going to make it through in 2nd place with Kungana in 1st. So that's my prediction going into Group D, is that it's going to be Kungana in 1st and Renegades in 2nd. So there you go. There's looking through Contenders. If I scroll down on this, you can see that the schedule is June 25th, which is in, well, by the time this gets published, it'll be the 22nd, so in 3 days' time. And all of these games going to happen then. So there you go. Tune in. It's going to be sick.